Since we cannot escape nature, we attempt to placate it. Modern civilization stems from the simple act of placing seeds and plants into the ground. Houses and fields are
Be volunteers, good citizens, conscious of
when the plants are ready for harvest. When we invest so much time and energy in tending our plants, we must stay around to enjoy the fruits of our labor. Civilization stems from the simple act of placing seeds and plants into the ground.
Something gonna blast off.
And we are live. Welcome back to my favorite part of the week. It's when I get to hang out with my friends who are much cooler and smarter than your friends to talk about the future of higher education. Yes, even this week, cooler and smarter than your friends. This week, our placemakers are the amazing Dr. Julie Payne-Kirchmeier and amazing Dr. Josie Dahlquist. When I think about student affairs and student engagement, these are the two people that come to mind for me, and particularly as we think forward in terms of those that are thinking about where we're going to go from here. So I appreciate you joining me, although we are very socially distance. We're all in different time zones appropriately. Happy Memorial Day, and here we go. I want to jump right in because time's going to slip away. I am curious about your thoughts on where we go from here, and particularly, Julie, the other day you said, I'm tired of talking about the finances and the cost of everything. Maybe you didn't use those words, but I really want to focus on the value of the work that we do. And I think maybe more than ever that this coronavirus quarantine period, time away from campus, has shown the world the value of what we do to some extent. And so we've heard people clamoring, I want to get back to campus. I want to get face to face. I do value the social interaction. I do value the programming. At the same time, students who just came onto our podcast said, we need more. We need more in terms of wellness and in terms of you looking out for our mental well-being. But the cost issue doesn't go away. Right? This is not sustainable moving forward. So knowing that what we do is valuable, we need more and more and more of it, yet the cost issue isn't going to go away. What do we do? How do we approach that moving forward? Because none of this is sustainable. And as Scott Galloway would say, we're creating a system of haves and have-nots that is only getting bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of the gap.
Yeah.
Heavy hitting start.
Yeah, I love it when you just give me a softball at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your background, right? Yeah. No, I think, you talk about value, and I know we had this conversation last week, and I'm hoping to God our senior vice president for finance is not watching this right now. When we say, we don't care about money, of course we do. That's stewardship, and we have to really take into account the stewardship of a university, because these institutions, even the ones that are newer, have been here for a long time, and we serve a valuable purpose and mission. We all know the value of education. We know how it truly transforms lives. That is the conversation to me that should be starting any discussion about how we come out of this and about what we need to be providing, not just for, but with our students. So when I think about, and I take it from higher education to student affairs, even though all inextricably linked. Sarah, a colleague of mine, Todd Adams, who's here at Northwestern, told me about a quote from Sarah Boatman. She's a former VPSA. And she said, these are the times when student affairs shines brightest. We are used to getting into the work. We are used to sitting in these spaces and figuring out the hard things and doing it with people, not for them. And so to me, how we focus on value and stewardship is you look at them in a balance, but you have to go back to the core and the purpose about what you do. That frames your decisions. So if it's your mission to be a research institution that has a student learning and growth lens, you start there and then you build around it. And I know we also were talking about, you mentioned Scott Galloway and our whole statements out there about, he's right. We have created a system of haves and have-nots. It's been that way since the beginning of higher education. It's rooted in patriarchal constructs, and we know that, right? So, but I will say, and I challenge him a little on the language of we want to blow it up. I don't think we want to blow it up. We need to reimagine this thing, because that calls people into the change. It doesn't negate all of the work and the value that we started with.
And I think that's where people get maybe stuck, or we've had some missteps, is we think we can just recreate it instead of the philosophy of transformation. I also think of having the view of experimentation and being an entrepreneur, coming from a small business owner, we have to be nimble and fail fast and get dirty in our face and figure that out quickly, but be okay with that failure. The other thing that I think we need, and we've always needed, is embracing ourselves as storytellers, and not just when we're giving some keynote or a rah-rah speech, just show and prove the value is they say in marketing it takes 3 times for someone to actually finally hear something. And so if you haven't said the thing, not saying you should send 3 emails about the one thing that you need, but we need people, and not just the VPs, that can clearly communicate the value. And for me, of course, I'm advocating to do that always on social channels, but we've got to get out there and
the platform is less important than the story itself. And I hear you, Josie, when you talk about failing fast. We just set our priorities for how we are going to really discuss the student experience. So not if, but when we're going to hold that line, right? We do return in person, whenever that will be. What do we want that experience to feel like? Because we know what we start with won't be what we end with. This is, let's say, all of these campuses that are saying we're coming back in the fall. What we start with At Northwestern, it would be September, but other campuses in August will look very different in December, look very different in March. But there has to be a connective thread of what the experience feels like. And TJ, the students who were telling you we need more wellness and well-being and involvement and
Right.
engagement, they are telling you the value of our work. What
Sure.
we get to is the how.
Well,
So-
that's a powerful question and philosophy to like starting with the question of how do you want it to feel? Like you
Right.
can take that same question into a Facebook group. How do you want that experience to feel? Because we know we've been in some that are like
Mhm.
traumatic to be in, right?
Mhm.
Like we could easily produce all kinds of these spaces and courses and but like what's the root of it? What's the purpose? Even what's the feeling? And I think again that's where student affairs can shine. And the other people that I think we have to bring to the table are folks that are already in this sandbox. They always were. So marketers, teaching and learning, some folks that can maybe bring some of that context to us.
You
Mhm.
two are both saying all the things that make a whole lot of sense, which is why you're on the podcast. You don't even need me here. You two could just go and talk. But I tend to feel like you're outliers in higher education, right? You're thinking on the bleeding edge. You're thinking on out here, and that by and large, higher ed are these large, massive ships on the ocean that don't turn quickly, that are not open to failing. That so I wonder, I go back to that idea that you had, Julia, about instead, we shouldn't blow it up. We should reimagine it. How do you do that with the leadership that's in place in higher education today? Does this call for a whole new type of leadership in higher education, something different? Because I look at institutions that appear to be moving quickly, and those are usually the ones with very non-traditional leadership right now,
Mhm.
like Purdue.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily a change in the individual. I think it's elevating key skill sets and if they've got them or not,
Mm,
right? Whether they came straight out of higher ed and have been in higher ed administration forever, or whether they've come in from the outside, I don't think that's the game changer. It's can you think flexibly, nimbly, and Josie, I love the word you use, transformatively, and set this vision almost like a moonshot and say, this is what we're going for. Now, I need my team around me. How are we going to do that? Through telling stories. What does the financial landscape look like for us for short-term and long-range stewardship? How does it feel in a classroom? What does it feel like to be a student? And I would say not just an undergraduate student. We always forget our graduate and professional students, and we can't do that. It's how does it feel for everyone involved? And what's our responsibility to the community that we're in? We are part of a larger community here, whether you're public or private or land grant or flagship, doesn't matter. You're part of that and you have a responsibility. But it's that skill set of being able to flip and say, okay, I know we could go back and try and figure out how we get back to where we were. I would assert we will never be where we were, nor should we. Everything we do should build on something else. And this is an opportunity. This is a moment for us.
yeah.
I think we got to grab it.
And
What's
so,
wild about tech, and tech is the tool or context. This thing is like a bigger context of change, right? But it's emotional. It like triggers us certain things from when I say TikTok or when I say like we're gonna do a strategic plan, like those things evoke emotions, right? And
Mhm.
but the language we use really starts to matter, especially at that high level. I gave a keynote to a group of vice presidents in the fall. So pre-COVID. And the woman that gave the keynote after me, who was also a VP, her first slide, she knew what I was going to talk about digital engagement, social media, and leadership. Her first slide, which was her topic was about mental health, was social media is the root of all evil in student affairs.
oh,
I mean, she was coming at
Yeah.
me, but that view is shared by so many folks in education. So my advocacy is like first do a self check. Like, how do I already feel about tools or where we are now? Because it's definitely going to influence your philosophy, your programs, your policies. I guarantee that VP does not have a centralized communication strategy
Right.
or professional on her campus.
you want to call her out by name? It'll just
I
be the three
no,
of us
I don't
right
play
here.
like
I'm
that.
kidding. I'm
Right.
totally kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right. So those were my notes because you two are amazing.
Right.
So,
I think, Josie, your comment there about social media, and I think about those conversations. And TJ, I know you've heard them too. Like, you're at conferences and you're sitting around afterwards, and people are like, God, if we just didn't have social media, everything would be fine.
right.
I'm like, no, any tool can be used for good or evil, right?
Right.
And are there problems in social media spaces? Oh, yes, there are. How do we work with students who constantly feel like they have to curate their identities online? and face negative repercussions when they try to be as vulnerable, or in their words, as real as they can be in those moments, right? But there are also amazing things that happen in these spaces, and Josie is a testament to that and what she has done and helped people to do in helping to curate the story, and the number of connections that we've made. We literally connected with students who were worried about a classmate in a different country, and then we're able to reach out to that individual who had a plan for suicide and got her the resources that she needed. And so I think about those moments and how that tool literally saved a life, or was right there at the edge. And so that would be what I would come back to, in particular, that mental health professional with.
So, and maybe I'm naive in this, but it feels like now more than ever, the people at the top, the people in the leadership seats there's a bigger gap between them and the relevance in terms of the students that we're serving than maybe there ever has been before. And part of it has been the speed of technology, and the other part of it is my contention that COVID has been an accelerator, right? Like we're learning more in the last couple of months about what's relevant and what's not than maybe we have in the past 2 years. And so how do we close that gap up if our vice presidents and our presidents and our boards are potentially filled with people who are far, far, far away from relevance? What is the way that we fill that gap? Because we need that expertise in leadership. We need that expertise in the business of higher education and student affairs and the like. But what other things can we do to fill the gap in the middle?
I mean, for me, it's a little bit of releasing ego, like bring in a grad student into the cabinet meeting to talk about what TikTok really is.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine somebody talking TikTok in a
and
cabinet
not
meeting?
to, and then
No, I
show
love
him
it. We
and then
should.
show him Ajay Nayar, who's the president of Arcata University that does TikToks with his family. Now he's a very specific type of president that you can't like force folks into, right? But I know that they need to see their peers, and we also need to do it in spaces that because sometimes you feel you're in this position, you feel like you should know things, but when that gap is so big, then we just put a wall up and just can't even go there. So like, where's like just a little bit of wiggle room?
Do you think there's a little bit of a renaissance of that being sort of the archetype of a president moving forward? And I don't mean
I
the
think that's
archetype
the
of being
future.
online, but being a student's president. That used to be, we saw students presidents far more often 20 years ago than we do today, maybe. And it feels like the most relevant presidents are those folks who are students presidents, the ones who are, whether it's Santa Ono or look at what Swami does at UMass Amherst, and so there's people that are just visible and online and in people's spaces in a different kind of way. Is that the new archetype for what leadership looks like in higher education?
I hear visibility. I hear accessibility when you're telling the stories, and Josie, when you're bringing up the examples, and I think that because students expect that with each other and even with student affairs professionals, because we're all sort of engaging with them in a number of different ways, I think they expect it from their president. Now, presidents do more than just serve students, right? So I would say for student affairs professionals, that's amazing, right? You get a student-focused president like that, you can really partner in that space, and it elevates student issues up to the forefront.
Right.
What about our faculty? What about our research folks? If you're really at a comprehensive institution, what do they need? So when you talk about qualities of leadership, it's really multifaceted. So I don't know that you can compartmentalize to a focused president or not. I also think, Josie, you talked about, what do you bring somebody in to talk about TikTok at a cabinet meeting? I think that'd be fascinating. It would, particularly our cabinet, would be great to watch that happen. But one of the things I will say, and this is not a planted plug for Josie, but I'm gonna
should be
right, is we also have to create safe spaces for us to talk to each other where others can't hear us. And like, what the heck is this TikTok thing? I don't understand it. I can see stuff on it. I don't know how to post on it. That I can say that in a vulnerable way and get ideas from my colleagues. And so when she created like the connected exec thing that she's got going on in social media, that's really helpful for me because people can talk about how they're using it. And then I can ask questions that I think are dumb, to your point, TJ, about the gap. And I learned from my colleagues who figured it out.
Yeah. Well, and to pivot a little bit, but stick on sort of the leadership and the people that work in our space. I feel like over the last couple months, we're learning a lot about the nature of work. We're
Mm.
learning a lot about what it means to be a results-oriented workplace instead of a rules-oriented workplace. We're learning a lot. I mean, student affairs particularly is notorious for burnout, particularly for some of our frontline staff. What do you think we've learned over the past couple months about how we approach our work with students? Do we need to be face to face 24 hours a day? Do we need to be an 8 to 5 shop? Do we need, what have we learned about what we always thought about work, and how can it position us moving forward?
Mm.
I think this period of time has exposed the cracks maybe we already knew were there, but really were more like the Grand Canyon
Mm,
of when we do work hours, when we receive messages the most, who places the burden the most of those times on evenings and weekends. But also, like, we've always known that we've missed the cracks of certain student audiences that, again, like some of these tools could, I think, really fill those gaps, but it's going to have to redefine what we define as student engagement work, like what
Mhm.
defines it.
yeah,
And through what outcome. It's not gonna ever be just physical, and it shouldn't have ever have been.
right.
Just if a student shows up or is in a position, um, yeah, I don't and then I could get going on master's programs and what we need them to
Well, that's what
do.
I was going to ask. That question is have we learned more about how we're preparing professionals for the field, or are we learning more about how we write job descriptions and what we do with them once they become professionals?
I'm laughing when you said, "Have we prepared professionals?" Only because nobody taught me anything about a
Oh,
pandemic
sure.
response in
No, right, right.
grad
Yeah,
school
we're one of
ever.
the few fields that only prepares you for the entry level job, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
it's like going through med school and you now know how to work the waiting room in the hospital, right? It's
Mhm.
not a
Yeah,
good look. Yeah,
oops, yeah, and then I
yeah,
gotta figure out the rest along the
yeah.
way, and I'll say that professional associations help to fill that gap, which is
Sure,
helpful. But that's if you have access to them, right? And not all of
right.
our professionals have access to them. I This is an interesting blend. You start talking about preparation and sort of how does that connect to work. And one of the things I think we've learned, back to your original question, is we need to learn how to leverage technology, not fully rely on it. Because I am keenly aware that we are missing that face-to-face interaction with our students, and they are missing us,
Mm,
and being in spaces with each other that are not virtual and little squares on a screen. And that, as human beings, and all of our, sociologists would tell you this, that we crave this sort of a connection, and physical connection, right? Being in spaces together with each other so that we are in each other's presence. But we also can no longer rely solely on that. And we were in that mode, like, oh, here's our 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Yes, student affairs has weekend hours sometimes, and student affairs has
right.
evening hours, but we're going to schedule that out. I think this, and I'll call it a positive disruption, even though there's nothing positive about COVID other than some tests that you take,
Hmm.
is that we have an opportunity now to say 8 to 5 isn't the new normal. And we know that we can sort of ebb and flow with that work. And our lives aren't 8 to 5, our work's not 8 to 5. All of us are checking emails in the evening.
Student affairs, and maybe being able to not enforce, but like allow this concept of being in beta, that it doesn't, maybe
Mhm.
you start with just one
Hmm.
department to unpack and bring things back together. I do think eventually it's going to have to take down a lot of walls, not just within our
Mhm.
divisions, but throughout faculty and admissions, because we just weren't given access to each other at a lot of institutions before.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
there
that's
were
something we've learned on the pod over and over and over again, is that breaking down silos has to happen for the future of higher education. It has to
Mhm.
happen for us to be more
yeah.
effective, more efficient, for us to be better staff as it relates to working with students across the board. I'm really interested in this idea of, we talked about graduate programs and what they prepare you for and don't prepare you for. And had you asked me a year ago, if an entry level staff member had come to me and said, "Look, I aspire to be a VPSA. What's your best advice for me?" I would probably have told them to, look at VPSA jobs on higheredjobs.com, look at the Chronicle, look at those skill sets and look at what you don't have, and then find intentional ways to fill those gaps. I don't know that I would tell them the same thing anymore, because I'm not so sure that the VPSA VPSA job is going to look that way when they get there. And so I wonder if I think you two are best positioned to answer this kind of question. If somebody came to you and they were in their first, second, third, even up through their 5th year of employment in student affairs, a young student affairs professional, and said, look, I aspire to be the vice president. What kind of things should I focus on in terms of skill development? What are the things now? Is it, you know, I used to be able to point to finance and budgeting and leadership and even facilities to some extent. Is it different now?
Sure. Seriously, I think it's very different, and not just because of COVID. You know, I think about when I was in, you know, my master's program, and no one here really needs to know how long ago that was. You can look that up later.
3 years. It's all good.
4 years, right? 4
Yeah.
years. And the things that we were preparing for is the list that you just rattled off, TJ. Right? But there's more things that you learn about the nuance of the role as you gain experience. So there's something to be said for time. You know, I think we also have folks who are like, I want to be a VPSA and I want to be a VPSA in 6 years. Like, that's a little tough because there's a nuance to this. And as you said, higher education systems are big things and they have a lot of moving parts. And there's a political reality to this, and there are cultural implications, and there are transformative moments. And now we have a huge one. And so I think it's more, again, about the skills that you have. How can you be flexible and nimble? How can you inspire others to connect around a mission and a vision? You know, I was telling TJ before you popped on, Josie, when it has to be collective. And, you know, Penny Rue says a lot. And for those of you who don't know Penny Rue, you need to know her. People care about what they help to create. And so it has to be this collective vision. So someone that can call people into that space so that you're thinking about it and reimagining it together. It can't be top down anymore. You know, we are so multi-layered that listening to, and not just listening, but involving and truly including, not just bringing folks into a room and have them sit at a table, but truly including multiple stakeholders into anything that you do. You have to be able to do that, and you have to value that. You know, and you know, I think we all talk about why did we get into this field in the first place, and it's like, you know, somebody transformed my life or helped me discover something along the way, or there was something you connected with as a student. But I swear, if I hear one more person say, well, the reason I want to be a VPSA is that I love students, to me, that's a given. I don't need you to lead with that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's maybe not, you can't fault the person for the question, but like it's almost like you need a couple deeper questions, or to, because we have a lot of folks that have that aim, but the positions are going to change. And a lot of new VPs that I support are like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, you know, like, so like demystifying it, even what a dean of students used to be, for me, like I wouldn't go near that anymore, you know, like it's just a totally different job right now. So it's more, I don't think that's the aim. That's like just saying graduation, but you don't think about all those transformative things before you get there. Like,
well, and Julie, you said something that really reminded me. You talked about time and that time matters. And I heard somebody say, I can't remember who it was, that, you know, today particularly, we live in a knowledge economy where I can get anything I want for free online right now. You know, in a world where I can go to YouTube, or I can go wherever I need to go, or I can go to Linda or whatever, I can find any information that I need. And so knowledge isn't hard to find. What's hard to find is wisdom, you know, to apply that knowledge in the right ways. And when you talk about putting time in, that's what it reminds me of, is this notion of, you can have all the knowledge you want, but if you don't have the wisdom, none of that's going to matter. And then the other thing you said earlier that I think really plays into this when you talk about stakeholders and input is that you have to be willing to drop your ego. You know, leadership today is not about having an ego, and not about hierarchy, and not about being at the top and being the smartest person in the room.
It's no longer positional.
It's not. Right. So I think that's absolutely brilliant. Well, we never, ever want to leave a good crisis as an opportunity. And and for me, I always want to end on asking a question about, you know, what do you see as the opportunities? I think higher education, by and large, is in a position right now where everybody's trying to feverishly come up with what is the best plan I can come up with to get people back on my campus, to get things, and a lot of Band-Aids are going on, but it's to get things back to quote unquote normal. What I would hate to see us do is to miss an opportunity for a new normal, a better normal, that reimagining. So what are the things that we can do right now to take advantage of opportunities that as we do come back online, that we're in a better normal? What are the opportunities coming out of this thing?
There are two, and there are a lot of things. I think there's a ton of opportunity here. We already talked about how do we leverage technology that we now, in 2 months' time, everybody knows how to use, right? Because it was always about how do we train people? What does it look like? How do we manage security? That's done.
Mhm.
We've got a good baseline now for that. But I think about two things in particular, and one is what I'm seeing happen right now is we are having to reimagine long-standing systems and are asking really intense questions about why things are the way they are. And so we have an opportunity to really grab onto that, take our most vulnerable student populations, our marginalized student populations, put them at the center and reimagine those systems and how we make them work. So here we go. Let's challenge the notion of federal financial aid. Fine that we have it, we need it, it's a good thing. But when we come to the limit of cost of attendance and we have low income students that still have need and will have more need in a post COVID environment, there's no doubt we can't give them more aid. How can we give them access to the resources that they need without referring, or do we need to refer to social services? What does that partnership look like? That's not centering those students at the center of those systems, right? If we were to take it and put them at the center of it and then figure out how the system could work for everyone, you've leveled the playing field almost immediately. And we could do that with so many things, large and small right now, if we just remember to put those students at the center. And that to me is incredibly exciting, and things that both student affairs professionals, researchers in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and DEI professionals have been trying to talk about for years.
Yeah.
I love that. And so if I simply translate it, it's stop the bureaucracy. Is that what I?
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but yes.
Because there's whole jobs centered around creating levels of systems that make things more challenging than easy, particularly from a student lens. And I mean, we talked about just the other day, this notion that it's amazing to me that when a student comes to me and says, I want to get this vendor online to use my meal plan dollars, the answer is, well, Blackboard doesn't work that way. But yet a student came to us and said, hey, I just developed this app where any dining dollars can be used in any store, and here's how it works. Like we work and live in a gig economy, and higher ed just isn't there. It's way too system.
Look at our websites. We get so protective of where things go or what things called. The student is going to DM whoever, like, oh, they found the dean of students on Instagram. They're going to DM them, not because there was like a link to follow to do the thing, because they probably couldn't find it on the website anyway. So I really, really love that philosophy, Julie. I think just even going from that ethos is extremely powerful. I also would love us to reimagine the word virtual.
There you go.
Say more.
Just try your thing without using that word to see if it would still have the same impact. Now, obviously, if you want to make sure no one physically shows up to your campus to do the thing that you're like, then maybe you need to make it super clear this is online, Zoom, whatever. But I just saw that word being used without maybe the realization of what it means or the intent or the response to it. And I feel like it kind of diminished the work that we could really do.
Does it undercut the authenticity or realness of it? Is that
virtual means not real? It means that we see it already less than. And so again, if it's for students, ask them what they think of the word. If it's for faculty or whoever it is, like if we're using new vocabulary we maybe haven't before, like let's do a pulse check on it. But I think at the minimum, just to see what we call things going forward as we transform to make that just as much intentional as everything else in digital context.
Well, and stop thinking of the things that we do with these tools as higher ed light, and start thinking of it all as a blended way of how we deliver our work. That's phenomenal. Well,
use the tool the right way.
That's right. Well, I cannot thank the two of you enough, as always. You made me throw my notes away because you're so amazing, and we could go down rabbit holes all night long, but no podcast is wonderful after 30 minutes. So we're going to close things up for this evening. I can't thank you enough for the time that we've spent. Next week on the pod, we've got Brandon Busteed of Forbes and The Economist and a whole lot of other places where he writes about the future of higher education, and we're going to talk about it here as well. For tonight, I hope you have a great evening. To Julie and Josie, thank you so much, and we are signing off. Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And hold. And usually Diamond has us clear by now. Otherwise, people are listening to me right